We are ready.
All right, we are back with agenda item 12, which was the ARC DSS update. Brian.
Good afternoon, board. I'm Brian McPherson. I'm the CWCB's DSS specialist. And I'm here today to present or give you an update on the Arkansas River Decision Support System. It's appropriate, being in the Arkansas Basin, that I'm discussing this today. So in my talk, I'm going to give you an overview and history of the project and its context within the CDSS program in general. I'm going to give you an update on phase 1 of the project, which has been in the works since 2017 and is slated to run through 2020, this first phase. And I'll also give you the phase 2, phase 2 project that we're got in the works, that we're now in the midst of scoping and brainstorming how we'll move forward with that. So a little background on the basin DSSs. ARC DSS is, as Bill said, the last basin DSS to be done within the state, following the Colorado River DSS, Rio Grande, and South Platte most recently. The feasibility study for the Arkansas DSS was produced in 2011 during the SPDSS effort, and builds somewhat on top of the previous efforts of the basin DSSs that came before it. And the goals of the ARC DSS laid out in the feasibility study, and which are consistent with the other basin DSSs, are providing credible information for informed decision-making, assisting in administration and allocation of water, providing data and models to evaluate water development alternatives and administrative strategies, and promoting information sharing amongst government agencies and water users, all within the context of the Arkansas Basin. So just to give you a little better understanding of how the basin DSSs fit within the larger CDSS program, which I talked to you about last meeting. The CDSS, Colorado's Decision Support Systems, is the overall statewide program and encompasses on its own HydroBase, which is our water resources database, which includes things such as diversion records, water rights transactions, groundwater level, climate data, all the data that DWR collects around the state. And our software program, which includes our modeling software, state mod and state CU, as well as our data manipulation software, state DMI, TS tool, and our geospatial viewer online map viewer. And then there's the basin DSS side of the larger program, which really performs a deep dive into each basin and takes the better part of a decade that we've gone through each basin carefully, developed GIS layers, performed interviews, and developed task memos on the large projects and large water users in the basins, developed consumptive use models, surface water models, groundwater models, administrative tools, which I'll talk about in the context of ARC DSS coming up, and basin-specific issues, which is varied depending on the basin. So for example, in the Colorado, the compact is sort of the large issue that was delved into. The Rio Grande, the big issue is aquifer sustainability. South Platte really dove into changed water, well augmentation issues. And the Arkansas, has a focus on the large reservoirs in the basin and the administration that comes along with them and the compact. And the other thing to note about the basin DSSs is that they're performed in a very uniform approach in terms of gathering data and information and the modeling. And that really is important when performing statewide analysis, such as the water plan technical update. The fact that we gathered data and built the models sort of in an apples to apples fashion really lends itself for statewide modeling when we pull all those basins together. So ARC DSS phase 1, there are 3 components that we worked on in this first phase. The first being GIS. GIS really serves as the foundation for a lot of the data in terms of understanding irrigation consumptive use in the basin. So our contractor performed analysis on different decades from the 50s. So, we did 1954, 75, 88, 98 snapshots of the GIS data within the basin. What we do is we look at aerial photos and perform ditch service area mapping and irrigated parcel mapping with associated crop typing and attaching water supplies to each of those irrigated parcels, whether that be a ditch head gate or a well. We also perform canal mapping and irrigation, irrigation well information. So that irrigated parcel layers that we develop will eventually feed into state CU, the consumptive use modeling, and then state mod, or water allocation modeling. But it's really all built on this satellite imagery data and crop typing that we do in this phase. So this gets a little in the weeds, but essentially what we do is we take satellite imagery. We use 3 different types, perform all sorts of analysis in GIS, and develop master irrigated parcel layer. And eventually we connect those parcels to diversion records in Hydrobase or well associations. So once we develop the parcel layer, it ends up in our GIS system, in this case, Map Viewer, which is our outward-facing public, online geospatial viewer. So, here we have a map of Rocky Ford, and you can zoom around and see the crop typing. So in this case, I have a sorghum field highlighted, and you can see the ditch surface area that it's within, and all sorts of other pieces of information about each of the parcels. The data is also loaded into Hydrobase. So you can see here, I have the Catlin Canal pulled up, and you can see all of the irrigated parcels crop typed for each of the structures in the basin. And this gets used again in the modeling when it comes down to attaching this irrigated acreage with climate data to come up with a consumptive use demand. So that feeds into our consumptive use modeling and eventually our state mod modeling. So the next task we performed in phase 1 was consumptive use and water allocation modeling. So with that GIS data that we gathered, like I said, we combined that with climate data from the basin and developed consumptive use demands within the basin. We also, really fundamental task is performing interviews with water commissioners, conservancy districts, the large water users in the basin, and really document how each basin functions and what's really driving water use and administration in the basin. The consultants also really comb through all of the existing diversion, reservoir, pumping, call records that have been cataloged over the decades, perform QA, QC on them, and make sure they're up to current standards. And finally, we create the water allocation model in state mod, which is our statewide modeling software. And that includes water rights, diversions, irrigation, consumptive use, return flows, reservoir operations, flow, administration, everything that drives administration in the basin. And that modeling is used for planning statewide analyses like the water plan technical update, which you'll hear about tomorrow. Really bases their technical analysis on our state mod models, and also assists with administration. So the final task that we are in the midst of developing in phase 1 is administrative tools. And this was unique to the Arkansas DSS, but there's been a lot of interest in the way we've done this, and we may loop back around to the other basins and potentially develop administrative tools for them as well. So the first tool that we developed was a power company translator, and this really helps streamline data collection for DWR. They work with power companies to probably a dozen or so to get power information, which is how they do some of their well metering. So we just created a streamlined tool that they can all log in online and enter their data instead of having 12 different ways of getting emails and spreadsheets from each of the companies, which really streamlines DWR's process that they have to do each month. A colors of water mapping application, which Bill mentioned before. And this is I'll show you, on the next slide a little more what it looks like, but this is a web mapping tool that shows the color of water flowing by each of the main stem gauges. And it really is twofold in what it does. It aids in administration for DWR staff, and it also aids in transparency for water users who are interested in protecting their water rights, knowing whose water is where, making sure that their water rights are not injured. The third tool was a request tool where any water user in the basin that currently makes requests through the division office for reservoir release or exchange now can log into this website and make those requests through the site and receive approval or denial, with the click of a button from the Division 2 office. And it logs those transactions. And this really aids in end-of-month accounting and tracking what happened and when, instead of, again, the way it used to be done, which was through phone calls and emails to water commissioners. And finally, based off that request tool, we've developed an alert system where other water users in the basin, if their water right is impacted, for example, our in-stream flow group in their in-stream flow reaches, if there is an operation transpiring through their reach, such as an exchange, they'll be alerted through an email of that other water user's operation, which again really aids in transparency. So here's just a screenshot of the colors of water tool. This is the Arkansas above Pueblo gauge. You can see it's a little small, but you can see it's broken out: native flow, reservoir releases, reclamation project water, exchanges, etc. So you can see by day, you can go back or forward in time, and upstream to downstream, whose water is in the river, either being released downstream or exchanged. And below that, you can see a detailed breakout of those colors of water. So that sort of summarizes phase one, which will be working through June 2020. And phase two is on the horizon. So we have been working with guidance from the feasibility study, as well as input from Division 2 and water users on what our priorities are for Division 2. So, our main priorities at the moment are looking at groundwater. So compiling all of the existing aquifer information from USGS. Colorado State has done quite a bit of groundwater work in the basin, as well as all the well logs. Compiling that information, creating gridded data sets for water users, consultants to use, for water court, augmentation, that sort of thing. We're looking at additional modeling to satisfy the Trinidad Reservoir 10-year review process. So this is a compact requirement where the state, in collaboration with Reclamation, Kansas, the Purgatory District, you need to do analysis every 10 years on the effects of Trinidad Reservoir, and our model will be used in support of that analysis. Finally, there's been a lot of interest from water users as well as from around the state the colors of water tool, and we're looking at enhancements and potentially bringing it to a platform that can be used in other basins around the state, so more of a generalized platform to look at potentially other more detailed information, incorporating a larger spatial domain, things like that. So that's second phase of ArcDSS. So that's all I have. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Brian. Director Schwartz.
Thank you very much. Brian, just a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
As you're moving forward, and this is probably I'm not clear on, how how is that going to be paid for? Is this a budget item that we pay for it? And then secondly, if we need additional monitoring in the basin, you know, when it comes to and satellites, and so how is that paid for as well?
So historically, basin DSS funding has come from Projects Bill funding. So I probably will be coming for an ask in the next Projects Bill. There has been some funds spent on gauging new string gauges, and that will continue, especially as we get into more groundwater work potentially, more surface water work, identifying needed gauges within the basin. That comes out of the general ArcDSS allocation.
So this would be part of the projects bill, and won't a process that goes through the roundtable. This would be something completely.
Historically, it's come directly through the projects bill.
Thank you.
Director Goebel.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Like I mentioned, well, first of all, Brian, thanks for the presentation. And when you presented to us a few months ago, I said the same things, but you know, it's not always best to be last, but sometimes when you're last, you get the best toys. So we're pretty appreciative for a lot of these tools, and it sure makes water management easier. So I thank you for all your work. And I did have just a specific question. What will the grid size be for the aquifer characteristics?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure as we're compiling the data, what's available and what we'll be able to do for grid size. I'm not sure that has been determined yet, and we will investigate that and make it known as we're scoping phase 2.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you for that update.
Thank you.
Okay, we are on to agenda item 13, which is an alternate transfer method grant. Alex.
Members of the board, Alex Funk for the record, CWCB staff. Today we have an ATM grant application from the city of Aspen. I'll spend a few minutes just sort of, again, kind of providing some highlights of the ATM grant program in this application in particular. We also have some members of the project team here today that can help answer any detailed questions the board may have on this application. So for some of the new board members, our ATM grant program has been around since about 2007. It provides financial support for projects that are seeking to further alternative transfers that minimize permanent reductions in irrigated acreage due to multiple factors, including growth in M&I demand, compact administration, and meeting environmental and rec flows as well. Financial resources are available, again, for a wide range of projects, including research into barriers to ATMs, as well as actually facilitating ATM projects. And the latter has been the focus of this grant kind of the last few years, and sort of as a segue to this project today, in that, you know, in Aspen's application, over the course of this project, they will be evaluating particular ATM projects that could fit into their existing water supply and region. And with that, I just kind of want to quickly highlight that there's a few like unique factors to this project that I think are very exciting. And the first is that this would be the first ever Western Headwaters municipality involved in a potential ATM project in the state of Colorado. As you know, a lot of our ATM projects have focused on the Front Range in the South Platte and in the Arkansas. We have funded ATM projects on the West Slope in the past, but a lot of those have looked at compact related issues and sort of looking at different impacts to pasture and forage due to deficit irrigation. And so this will be sort of our first standalone ATM project on the West Slope, which I think is valuable in that, I mean, Aspen, every ATM project's unique, but a lot of Western Slope users do face similar challenges, lack of storage, you know, potential extended drought moving forward, reduced flows due to climate change, and, you know, kind of having a project to point to that can sort of potentially provide a model for other portfolios on the Western Slope, I think could be of tremendous value, not only for the state, but those basins as well. And so a big part of that, this grant will be focused on that outreach and sort of providing looking at some of the issues that are very unique to the West Slope, particularly headwater regions, and lots of communication with the Colorado River Basin Roundtable on project status, as well as the other roundtables as well, because I think there is some interest, particularly from the 2018 drought, that there were a lot of opportunities to look at ATMs as a potential tool to address some of those issues moving forward. And I think the other kind of exciting aspect to this project is it will be looking at, as well, in addition to the municipal needs, opportunities to look to support in-stream flows as well in the Upper Roaring Fork. So, very supportive of, again, utilizing ATMs to address these multiple different challenges across the state, and encouraging to see projects come forward that are going to help explore that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'll also invite the project team consisting of Todd, Margaret, and Laura to come up to talk a little bit about the project in more detail.
Great, thanks, Alex. Welcome. If you all could please state your name as you speak, we'd appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name is Margaret Medellin, and I manage the water rights portfolio for the city of Aspen. And we want to thank you for hearing us today. We're really excited about this project. And I just wanted to give you a little story behind the genesis of this project. So in Aspen, we are really working on the resiliency of our water system. Right now, we have less than a day's worth of water storage, and we've long planned to build reservoirs in the Aspen area, but it has been a challenge, and we do have conditional water rights up Castle and Maroon Creeks, which are the watersheds that provide municipal water to Aspen. And in the last diligence period, we had 10 opposers opposing our rights to that water. And the really exciting part of this grant application is that in that process, we were able to get together and talk and come up with innovative ways that maybe we could help meet some of the resiliency issues that we're facing, and also have benefits to the local environment. So working with Western Resource Advocates and also Wilderness Workshop, which is a local environmental group in Aspen, we came together to talk about the concept of ATMs. And that turned into a workshop, and then followed by this grant application. So wanted you all to have a little idea of kind of the exciting story that went behind this, and turning opposers into collaborators. And thank you again for hearing our story. And I think Laura is going to give you a little bit more background.
Thank you. Thank you, Margaret. I'm Laura Belanger with Western Resource Advocates. And yeah, I want to thank you all very much for considering this grant application. We're an environmental organization, and we're very excited about participating in this multi-beneficial project with the city of Aspen. And I do want to, there you are, thank Margaret very much, as she explained. I mean, we came into this because we were concerned about these reservoir locations in the Maroon Bells Wilderness, and we are super appreciative of the city for being open to discussing with us and considering different alternative supplies, and then also for adding in and looking at, as they're looking at ATMs, adding in this environmental component and looking at, are there ways that we can also potentially use ATMs to benefit environmental flows in the Upper Roaring Fork watershed. So we're really excited about that. We also wanted, while I'm here, I wanted to thank Alex Funk, your CWCB staff, because Margaret briefly mentioned that workshop that we hosted back in, it was last October in the city of Aspen. And that was to bring together some water rights holders and other stakeholders just start having this conversation about ATMs and start educating people about them and hearing what potential concerns would be. And Alex was instrumental in helping us pull that together. It was very well attended. I think people were really excited about it. We saw a lot of nods and people taking a lot of notes, and that was very much in large part thanks to Alex and his really great input pulling speakers together. So I wanted to thank him. So thank you very much for your consideration, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Director Schwartz?
Turn on, there it is. Thank you. Appreciate you all coming over the hill and being here to present this. I think it is, and again, I think Alex, your ability to kind of work with a community with a fairly innovative approach to ATMs. I think that one of the ideas that can also come out of this is the Trans Mountain diversion issue, that trying to work on both sides of the divide. And we didn't necessarily hear that in the introduction, but how can we work and address, when you look at the, really de minimis in-stream flows that we get through the city of Aspen when those gates are fully open, taking the water on the other side of the divide. So I think that this is going to solve, it's going to be a very innovative approach, an interesting approach, and also can be, I think, a model for other areas, especially on Western Slope and other areas that have diversions taken out of those drainages.
Director Trick.
Just a question kind of as a segue from that comment. So the application stated that the project will investigate water sharing agreements with East Slope water users. So who are those water users? Are they already people you have in mind? How is that envisioned right now currently?
Hello, board, Todd Doherty with Western Water Partnerships. There are a few that are, we have a list of the various Fry Arc users as well as Twin Lakes water right holders and users. Obviously, there's some, this project team has informed outreach to Colorado Springs Utilities, Aurora. But we're really looking at this as, obviously, if a project was to come out of this, be a pretty darn complex project. And this is really the first step of having discussions with some key water users, looking at potential, like if there was an exchange, let's say we did an ATM in the Arkansas, would Colorado Springs be willing, under certain circumstances and whatever that deal might look like, exchange that water for some of the water from Twin Lakes or Fry Arc? So that's we do have a list of all those users, and we probably won't be talking to everyone, but some of the larger users of that water.
Thanks, Todd. And then a similar question just on the other side. So have there been ag users identified to be involved in this project? And if so, who are they? And if they have not been identified, how do you plan on doing outreach to those users?
Right. So it really is dependent upon the municipalities on the East Slope, if they're willing. And if so, then that would be a part of being able to identify some of the agriculture water rights that we'd want to target. So there could be a meeting or so of those ag users, but it really is dependent upon a project that can be successful with a partnering municipality. Oh, the West Slope? Was your question more directed on the West Slope?
Yeah, more
Yes.
than likely, yeah.
So my apologies. I thought you were staying on the East Slope. Yeah, in general, we do have a list of the ditches that are in the vicinity on the West Slope in the Upper Roaring Fork, and we will probably be talking to every one of those to see their interest in participating in an ATM.
And I'll just add to that. At the October workshop, it was well attended by some producers from the Upper Roaring Fork region. And so we sort of talked about this conceptually at that meeting. And so it's definitely, it's on the radar potentially of some potential producers to be involved in this project.
Director Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a conceptual question as we look at the terms of current terms of the ATMs, number of years. that you can take advantage of an exchange? One, would you just get multiple folks to work with you on exchanges? Because when you don't have a supply that you can count on, you can't build it into your municipal water system. So, little awkward question, but how do you plan to work this out when we talk about 1 day's worth of resource? How are you going to layer that? How's that going to work? And because you can't necessarily count on that as part of your water supply resource.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think something we really think a lot about and have struggled with this concept. And so really, so in Aspen, we operate an integrated water supply system. So we really have a lot of different tools. Just really to that point, no one tool is going to be available or effective at all times. So as part of the stipulations that we came to with the posers in our water court case, we're still proceeding with more for storage for the city of Aspen. We are looking at alternative locations, which were better from an environmental perspective, but this does not take away the need for us to develop storage. It'll just be a piece of that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about the project? Great. Director Schwartz.
See no further questions? We're not taking this information only, or are we taking action on this item?
There's a staff recommendation to approve this grant.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure I would move approval of agenda item number 13 and the staff recommendation.
It's been moved by Director Schwartz and seconded by Director Hawkins to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 13. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
All right, the next agenda item that we are on to is item 14, which is the 2019 in-stream flow appropriations. Rob.
Good afternoon. For the record, Rob Veal, CWCB staff. We're going to start out with agenda item 14A, and this is going to be final action on the Himes Creek ISF appropriation. As you might remember, on March 21st, after reviewing the written materials and listening to staff's presentation, the board formed its intent to appropriate an in-stream flow water right on Himes Creek located in Water Division 7. Soon after, pursuant to Rule 5D of the rules concerning the Colorado in-stream flow and natural lake level program, notice of the board's action was sent to the ISF subscription mailing list. Consequently, this appropriation was contested by the Dolores Water Conservancy District and the Southwestern Water Conservation District. Western Resource Advocates filed for party status, and Trout Unlimited filed for contested hearing participant status. Staff, along with the AG's office, worked diligently with the districts to develop mutually acceptable terms and conditions regarding this appropriation. The final signed stipulation agreement between the districts and staff is attached to the board memo. It is important to note that if the board decides to include these terms and conditions in its final action today, the districts agree to withdraw their notices to contest. Similarly, Western Resource Advocates and Trout Unlimited have agreed to provisionally withdraw their notices of party status and hearing participant status upon the district's withdrawal of its notices to contest. Paper copies of WRA's and TU's conditional withdrawal notices were handed out to the board earlier today, so hopefully you had a chance to look at those. And to summarize, if the board accepts the terms and conditions agreed upon by staff with the districts and include them in their final action today, all parties and participants agree to withdraw from this contested appropriation. One entity staff has been working with but did not file for any status in this contested appropriation is Bootjack Ranch. Staff in the AG's office have been in contact with the ranch's representative several times, And yesterday we received a first draft of terms and conditions they would like staff to include in the Himes Creek ISF Water Court decree. While staff isn't prepared to finalize the agreement today, we are committed to working on these terms and conditions, which include verifying the legal description of the Himes Ditch Head Gate and providing reference to Statute 3786-111 with Buchak for inclusion in any subsequent water court action. So real quickly, I just wanted to show you some kind of interesting photos here. At the March meeting, we talked a lot about the importance of protecting the natural flow regime of Himes Creek and the variability of flows. So this slide shows the same exact location at two different points. So one is from September of 2017, and the other is from this June. So you can see there's quite a bit of difference in the water. And I couldn't include this presentation without having a picture of the San Juan lineage cutthroat trout either. This looks so cute up there. So the staff recommendation is kind of long, so I'm going to kind of read through it into the record. And staff recommends that the board take final action on Himes Creek ISF appropriation and make the following determinations and take the following actions on Himes Creek based on the information presented by the U.S. Forest Service and Colorado Parks and Wildlife at the March 21st, 2019 board meeting, information contained in staff's memo, as well as information presented by staff both in writing and orally at the March 21st board meeting. So determined pursuant to section 3792-102(3), and based upon the review of the data and other information presented by staff, CPW, and the U.S. Forest Service, that for the ISF on Himes Creek, for all the unappropriated flow from its headwaters to the Himes Ditch Headgate, there is a natural environment that can be preserved to a reasonable degree with the recommended water rights, if granted. B, that the natural environment will be preserved to a reasonable degree by the water available for the recommended appropriation. And C, such natural environment can exist without material injury to water rights. And then 2, pursuant to ISF Rule 5F, established March 21st, 2019 as the appropriation date for this water right, accept the terms and conditions agreed upon between staff and the districts as part of this final action, and include the terms and conditions in the water court decree for the Himes Creek ISF. So the full text of those terms and conditions are included in staff's memo. It's kind of long, so I wasn't going to read all those into the record, but finally, direct staff to request that the Attorney General's office to file the necessary water rights application and include the terms and conditions contained in staff stipulation with the districts in the water court application and decree for this ISF appropriation. So that's all I have today. I think there's some people from the general public that would like to speak about this. I can answer any questions as well.
Great. Thank you, Rob. We do have one gentleman who's asked to speak, and that's Steve Harris. He asked to provide public comment. Steve, if you could state your name and who you're with.
Steve Harris. It's been a while since I've been before the board. It's good to see a bunch of new faces and some old ones. I'm representing the Dolores Water Conservancy District as their consulting engineer, and also Southwestern Water Conservation District as their interim executive director. And the interim is a lot shorter today than it was a couple days ago, after the board considered a bunch of very good candidates. And on Monday, made Frank Kugel as I just forgot what you call it. The finalist, thanks. The finalists, there's a 2-week public comment period, and then before they can negotiate a final agreement for employment. But that's well along on the way. So my interim is getting better, shorter, and somebody else will be up here probably the next time for Southwest District. My position on this is really, really easy. The two districts spent a lot of time with staff in the AG's office working on this. It's a good example is that it's good to take the time to negotiate things so you can get an agreement by everyone, and we're all in favor of it. The two districts are fully supportive of the staff recommendation, and I'll be glad to take any comments.
Steve, thanks for being here, and thanks for all your work with the staff. Are there any questions or comments for Steve? Yes, Director Hawkins.
Steve, thanks for coming today. I just wanted to extend my thanks to the boards and staff of both
organizations for the time that they took to resolve this. I really appreciate the time that you spent, and I'm just thrilled that we have the full support of both districts today.
Thank you. And I have actually been up on the stream too. One of the few people it's hard to get to. Anything else? Thank you. Got any questions? I'll be around.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Rob about the appropriation or his recommendation to the board? Director Hawkins.
If there are no other questions, I would move to approve staff recommendation on item 14A.
It's been moved by Director Hawkins and seconded by Director Yon to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 14A. Is there any discussion? Director Brody.
I too just wanted to commend staff and the AG's office and all of the various agencies that have provided technical analysis and support for this effort. I know that this has been a long time in the works, and I know it's taken a lot of creative thinking and diligent efforts on the part of all the parties to get to this point. So thank you for your efforts on behalf of the board, and thanks to the parties who participated and for your thoughtfulness in coming to a solution.
Director Yon?
I did have a comment, but it was exactly the same. So I won't reiterate. We must be sitting
Great.
close together here.
Director Trick.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can we add something to the staff recommendation under number 3 that will address the process you're going to go through with the Boot Jack Ranch in resolving their issue prior to filing the water court application, if need be, or during that process?
Sure, we could add something in there.
Just acknowledging that you're going to work through their issues with them and have that be part of the recommendation here.
Yes, that'd be appropriate. Thanks.
Okay.
Director Hawkins.
Rob, I just want to double check that if we add something that won't, I did see the language in the, that we needed to be careful about not voiding the stipulation with the district. So can we add something without voiding the stipulation with the districts?
My understanding, but I'll ask Jen as well, that as long as we're not actually changing the stipulated language, we should be okay. But just adding on something else to the board's recommendation shouldn't invalidate that agreement.
Jen Mealy, for the record, since my name was called, I feel obligated to come up here and say, yes, I agree with that. As long as we're not changing the terms of the stipulation, it should be fine.
As some clarification on process, Counselor, do we need to amend the motion to approve staff recommendation with additional language for item 3? Director Hawkins, would you like to amend your motion?
My motion is so amended.
Okay. Director Yon? Great. Okay. Director Gibbs?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just also want to thank Robert, Linda, your team, Becky, for working, many months on this. This is truly amazing when you think about all the stakeholders that were involved and some of the folks that did have some heartburn originally working with folks, and the AG's office. Amy, thank you so much too. The governor is so excited about this. As some of you know in the room, actually on Earth Day, one of his announcements was that CWCB was working through a process. At that time we didn't know, actually we don't know how the votes will turn out still, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but working through a process of potentially, approving this, and how exciting this is that the state of Colorado is working to explore possibilities for in-stream flows that could be beneficial for this very unique, San Juan lineage cutthroat trout. So he actually has a poster of the trout, in his office. So thank you everyone for your efforts. It's really, truly amazing.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Director Beatty.
I was thanked, but I would much prefer to say thank you to my team. The team at the Attorney General's office that represents staff did an absolutely wonderful job on this and worked really hard with corralling parties. So I'd just like to give them a shout out too.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, we will proceed to vote on the motion to approve staff recommendation on agenda item 14A with additional language in part 3 of that recommendation to work with the Boojag Ranch. All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. All right. Good work, guys.
All right, great. So I'm still up here. So this is Rob Vail again for the CWCB staff. This is an easy one. This is an informational item only. This is the in-stream flow appropriations on Disappointment Creek, the upper and lower segments, and Trout Creek. On January 29th, 2019, the CWCB formed its intent to appropriate ISF water rights on Trout Creek and the 2 segments of Disappointment Creek. Both of these ISFs were contested, and the board appointed a hearing officer and set the hearing date to coincide with the September 17th through 19th, 2019 meeting. Staff, in conjunction with the AG's office, have been working to resolve the concerns raised by the contesting parties related to these appropriations, and all the parties agree that additional time was needed to determine if settlement is possible and to finalize details of such settlement. And to avoid the time and costs associated with the deadlines set by the hearing officer, all parties agreed to a continuance request for the deadlines and submissions, excuse me, for the hearing in both matters to take place at the November 2019 CWC meeting if needed. And the hearing officer graciously accepted these unanimous motions requesting continuance and issued an order in both cases setting new deadlines that will push the deadlines further into the fall with the hearing expected in November. Staff will continue to work with these parties to resolve these cases in the hopes that there won't be a need for the hearing at all in November. So that's all I have for that item, but I can answer any questions too if you have them.
Great. Are there any questions for Rob about this matter? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. We are at agenda item 15, which is the contested in-stream flow hearing process overview with our council.
Hello, everybody. Amy Beatty, Deputy Attorney General for Natural Resources at the Attorney General's Office and counsel to the board, and hearing officer, many hats. I am here to talk to you all today about contested hearing processes. Many of you are new and you have just heard updates on contested in-stream flows, and it occurred to all of us that it would probably behoove us if we spent a moment sharing with you what the contested hearing process looks like, and also sharing with folks external to the CWCB what to expect from the process, since it's been a while since you've had one. It does sound to me, especially when I received some requests to move back the hearings and to move back some of our deadlines, that settlement discussions are going well. So we might actually not need to hold these contested hearings. But in the event, I mean, the process is annualized and it always allows folks to contest your in-stream flows. So we felt like it made sense for us to continue with this agenda item and share some information with you about your contested hearing process. Yeah, I just mentioned that your in-stream flow process is an annualized process. You actually have a rule that spells out general timelines across a year for your in-stream flow process. That process is spelled out in Rule 5C. The kickoff is at your January board meeting. A list of in-stream flows to be appropriated that year is provided to you. And actually your in-stream flows can go down two pathways. By March 31st, a notice to contest is due. So that would take an in-stream flow down your contested hearing process. If you don't receive a notice to contest, then you can actually move ahead on approving your in-stream flows at the May meeting. And then the Attorney General's office will go and file for your water rights. I'm focused on the contested hearing process. So that's what's going to be spelled out in this presentation. So March 31st, you get a notice to contest. April 10th, staff notifies the in-stream flow mailing list of contested appropriations. By April 30th, you'll get a notice of party or contestant hearing participant status. You actually just heard in the presentations earlier about who had party status and who had contestant hearing participant status. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the difference between those two things and a little bit later in the presentation. By the May board meeting, staff reports to the board which of the in-stream flow appropriations are contested. The board will set hearing dates at that meeting and then appoint a hearing officer under Rule 4F. So you all did that process when we were in Gunnison. In July, the filing of legal memos, engineering, biological data, witness lists, which needs to occur, and a pre-hearing conference needs to be held. So essentially, there's a pre-hearing statement due date, and a pre-hearing conference is designed to bring all of the parties together so that they can actually talk amongst each other so that you don't get duplicated evidence, witnesses saying the same things in your contested hearing process in front of you. So the pre-hearing conference is really designed to focus and streamline all of your processes. By August 15th, rebuttal statements are due. In September, the notice of the final staff recommendations is sent to everyone on the contested hearing mailing list. Staff will make final recommendations to the board at the board meeting, and the board can hold you will hold your contested hearings. In November, board updates go out on the hearings, and you may take final action on your contested cases. So here's your timeline. A little bit of river photos because this is really dense legal stuff, and so I thought I would bore you. So you heard about a hearing officer. You appointed me as your hearing officer at the meeting in Gunnison at your last meeting. From the rules, the hearing officer is appointed by the board and is responsible for managing and coordinating proceedings. It lists what those responsibilities are, and then I bolded and underlined the information at the bottom of the definition of the hearing officer, which is the hearing officer doesn't have the authority to rule on substantive issues. That's your job. So really my job is procedural balls and strikes and queuing up the parties so that you all understand what is happening in the contested hearing, but the ultimate decision resides with you all. I also wanted to let you all know that the two people who held the same position before me also had this role. There is a difference between party status and contested hearing participant. There are procedures that you need to follow in order to obtain party status. If you actually file a notice to contest, you're automatically considered a party, or you can file a notice to participate as a party, or you can file a notice to participate as a contested hearing participant. If you file as a party, you get to essentially participate in all of the information providing activities a contested hearing allows for. So you can submit evidence, you can present technical witnesses, you can file legal memoranda. If you are a contested hearing participant, you can receive all of that, but you can't submit any of it. It's essentially like monitoring in water court. The parties are required to file pre-hearing statements under Rule 5N, and the pre-hearing statements, and by the way, all of the information around these contested hearings is provided to you prior to the hearing in the same way that your materials are provided to you before you come to a board meeting. So you will receive all of the things that have been filed in these cases so that you can review the materials prior to your hearings. We receive pre-hearing statements, and the pre-hearing statements contents are spelled out in Rule 5N. Specific statements of the factual and legal claims asserted, copies of any exhibits that they want to put, anyone who is participating in the hearings wants to put in front of you need to be included, a list of witnesses to be called and a brief description of their testimony, any alternative proposals that they have to the in-stream flow appropriation, and any written testimony and legal memoranda. So it will essentially, it essentially lists all of the things that the parties intend to provide to all of you as part of the contested hearing process. So that's everything that's in your pre-hearing statement. So we schedule pre-hearing conferences. The rules actually require us to hold a pre-hearing conference before the July board meeting. I didn't hold any pre-hearing conferences because we got motions to move the dates because parties were engaged in settlement. The rules also allow us to move dates and deadlines in order to facilitate settlement and for good cause shown. So we can adjust the schedule as we want to. So I send a modified schedule. Jackie has it right now and she can pass it around, but you can see that we actually got a motion to move some of the deadlines, which you just heard about in the Trout and Disappointment Creek in-stream flow contested hearings. So we moved all of their deadlines. Otherwise, we would have spent yesterday in a pre-hearing conference, which would be designed to focus the parties and the presentations that they would make to you. At the hearing, you have a lot of authority, and it is something that I can work with you all on. You have the authority to administer oaths and affirmations. You can regulate the course of the hearing. You can agree to hear argument or not. You can agree to hear rebuttals. You can actually even agree to hear just from people from the, you can agree to hear from the public. People don't actually have to have filed in order to present evidence to you. You can say someone from the public's concerns are worth our hearing, so we actually have the authority to allow them to come before us. So you're not bound by rules of evidence. You're not bound by the rules of civil procedure. You have an incredible amount of flexibility for the information that comes before you. You also have the ability to limit the information that comes before you. And you can also approve or take your final action at the hearing or at a later date. So you all can decide at the hearing, we're ready to decide what we want to do about this in-stream flow, or you can actually move it to a later date. So you have flexibility in terms of your decision-making process as well. You can also extend the hearing and ask for more data, more facts, and more information. So really, honestly, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of the information that comes before you in order to help you make your decisions.
I just had a quick question about expert testimony versus lay testimony. Is there any distinction in these hearing rules? Is there a process to qualify people as experts, or does everybody kind of just get to say what they want to say?
We apply the strict Doe-Bear standard. No, no. I mean, it says experts, but people can call witnesses, and according to Linda, and nobody has ever been quote unquote qualified as an expert. But that would be fun. But we don't need more process. So I think really, honestly, it's just witnesses who present testimony to you, and they can be expert or lay. And there isn't a distinction in your rules. So what is that all about? What's that all for? What do you guys need to do while you're making your way through all of these processes? Those are the required findings. The board has to make the following determinations, and they're going to look really familiar to you because they're statutory. They're driven by 32 or 3792 102 3C, which is that there's a natural environment that that the in-stream flow will preserve to a reasonable degree. The natural environment will be preserved to a reasonable degree by water available for the appropriation, and that there won't be material injury. And I put down on the bottom, this is really important. In a hearing on a contested in-stream flow appropriation, a party may raise only those issues relevant to the statutory determinations required. So that's fancy for somebody coming before you can't say, for example, if you appropriate this in-stream flow, my basement floods and it will keep water in the river, and I'd rather there's water out of the river because that's not relevant to your findings. So your focus and the party's focus needs to be on those three determinations that you need to make in order to determine whether or not you want to approve the in-stream flow. So that was designed to be a very broad, very quick overview. It's an annualized process. You have spelled out in your rules very specific dates and deadlines for your contested hearings. I call balls and strikes on process. You call balls and strikes on substance. And your hearings are now, and I also put up the same dates and deadlines that you just got from staff. So I wanted to make sure that you all knew that we've moved everything until November. So all of them are upcoming at the November board meeting. And I am happy to visit with all of you more as you have questions, and as this process evolves, you'll hear from me periodically in the role of your hearing officer. And also keep in mind that when an in-stream flow moves into the contested process, that we have to be careful with ex parte communications, because you have essentially become judges. So that's it for me. If you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Oh, hold on one second.
Holding on.
Did I get anything wrong? Okay. I was just checking with Linda to make sure that I hadn't, that there can be rules and there can be practice, and I wanted to make sure everything was in alignment.
Are there any questions? Director Anderson?
Has this board had contested hearings in the past?
Yes, but my understanding is that it has been quite some time. There was one queued up for last year, and my understanding is that it settled, and then I think it's been a half a decade since a hearing actually occurred. Half a decade.
Would you send us the PowerPoint? It's a good reference.
Sure, be happy to.
Director Schwartz?
Mike here. Will all of that material be available to the board in the event there is a hearing? Will it be available, period? One, I assume we can attend the conference. Is that only for, what parties can attend the conference?
The parties and the contested hearing participants.
And the board has
but
never
not the
come.
board, no.
No board.
No board.
But all that conference materials, everything has been submitted, as well as rebuttal statements, all that's available to us when, whether it's a hearing or not, correct?
Yes. In fact, all of the filings in each of these contested hearings are on the CWCB's on your website. So if you go into the in-stream flow program drop down, you can find them. It's very intuitive. You can find them pretty easily. So any orders that are issued, like the order that I am sending around, or motions from the parties, the notice to contest, the filings of party status, all of that information is available on your website, and will also all be delivered to you in the same format that you all receive your materials prior to the board meeting.
Yeah. Linda Bassey with the Stream and Lake Protection Section. If we actually hold a hearing, we will prepare a hearing notebook that will have all of those documents compiled in one place, starting from the very beginning with the declaration of intent to appropriate.
Thanks. Great. Thank you for that update. Okay, we are on to agenda item 16, which is the Attorney General's report.
Hello, everybody. Amy Beatty, counsel to the board. Director Weiser, sorry to miss today, but he looks forward to joining everyone here tomorrow. As you know, the Attorney General's report is in the board's materials. Our team is here, and we're happy to respond to any questions on the report before we move into executive session.
Are there any questions? Please proceed.
If there are no questions, do we have any board disclosures for conflicts?
Director Anderson?
I want to disclose that the Uncompahgre Valley Water Users Association is a qualifying project for the MOA funds, and we have completed a project and we're looking to complete another one.
Thank you. And now pursuant to statute, I recommend that the board make a motion to go into executive session to consider item 17A through C as identified on the board's agenda. We are also possibly adding the topic of the Colorado River Demand Management Disclosure Agreement. This executive session is authorized pursuant to the provisions of sections 24-6, 402, 3A2, and 3 of the Colorado Revised Statutes, which allow the board to enter into executive session for conferences with attorneys representing the board to discuss disputes that are the subject of pending or imminent court actions, to discuss specific claims or grievances, or to receive legal advice on specific legal questions. We need a motion.
Director Brody?
I'd like to move that we go into executive session for the purposes identified by Director Beatty.
It's been moved by Director Brody and seconded by Director Brown to go into executive session. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will take a 10-minute break so that staff can get everything changed over, and when we come back, we will be in executive session. Okay, we are at agenda item 18, which is our report from executive session.
Pursuant to statute, the board went into executive session to consider items 17A through C. We also discussed the Colorado River Demand Management Disclosure Agreement. Discussion during the executive session was limited to those items and no formal action was taken. Please also note that for item 17B, Director Brody recused herself and was not in the room during the discussion. We are now out of executive session.
We are in agenda item 19, which is the water delivery agreement with the city of Boulder. Linda.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is agenda item 19, City of Boulder Water Delivery Agreement from Gross Reservoir for in-stream flow use in South Boulder Creek. This is an action item, and I want to make a note that I've amended the staff recommendation a little bit, so you'll see the amended staff recommendation on the PowerPoint when I get to it. I've just added a little bit of language, which I will point out to you. So I know you have heard about this proposal twice already, but still, just I think for the record, I'm going to go through it a little more briefly than last time. The acquisition proposal is an offer of a contractual interest in gross reservoir and environmental pool releases for in-stream flow use to preserve the natural environment to a reasonable degree in South Boulder Creek from the outlet of Gross Reservoir to the confluence with Boulder Creek. And this would be done under a water delivery agreement for up to 5,000 acre feet to be released from Gross Reservoir to maintain various target flow rates in 3 segments of Boulder Creek. Here is a map showing those 3 segments. Here's Gross Reservoir. Segment 1 goes down to a gauge. Segment 2 goes to South Boulder Road. Segment 3 goes from South Boulder Road to the confluence with Boulder Creek. And want to make a note, we have existing decreed in-stream flows on segment 1 and 2. We do not have one on segment 3, so the flow rates that the board will find appropriate to preserve the natural environment will be confirmed in the water court proceedings to which we are a co-applicant. And I'll talk about that a little more as we go on. So the Rule 6 process requires a minimum of 2 board meetings. We're above and beyond on that. It's your 3rd look at the proposal, and we're recommending at this meeting that the board accept this offer of an interest in water. No hearing was requested after the board's first look at this proposal. We requested recommendations from the required agencies, and CPW's recommendation letter is attached to your memo. And we also have provided all the required notices to the substitute supply plan notification list and in-stream flow subscription mailing list. So a couple of questions and issues came up at the May meeting. The first was whether the statutory prohibition on acquiring conditional water rights would apply to and impact this proposal. And we've consulted with the Attorney General's office and been advised and have concluded that it is not. The statute distinguishes between acquiring water rights or interests in water, and this proposal is for the board to acquire a contractual interest in water from the city of Boulder of a portion of a conditional water right. And the board is not acquiring a conditional water right here. The other issue is whether the board needs to be a co-applicant in the 2 water court cases that would decree the use of this water, of this interest in water for in-stream flow. While we thought we were on a path that was acceptable and that it was appropriate in this situation because the question came up, and we just thought that this would be a better approach to become a co-applicant in both cases. We worked with the city of Boulder, contacted all the parties in the case, and had uncontested motions, and we are now a co-applicant for the limited purpose of obtaining a decreed right to use water by released by Boulder from the gross environmental pool. So the water that Boulder is offering is up to 5,000 acre feet of that pool, plus exchanged water is available. It gets exchanged up and stored in Gross Reservoir for later releases for in-stream flow use in Boulder Creek. CWCB and Boulder will enter into a water delivery agreement. The draft is attached to your memo as attachment 1. And we need to make a couple of tweaks to that agreement to acknowledge and document that CWCB indeed is a co-applicant in those cases. So this is an almost final form of the water delivery agreement. And so operations of this environmental pool and our use of the water will be guided by several documents listed up here: decrees, 2 IGAs, and the water delivery agreement. And the water will be used to preserve the natural environment to a reasonable degree on 3 segments. And in these flow amounts, segment 1, gross reservoir down to the USGS gauge, 10 CFS in the winter. Winter for all of these reaches is May through September. 7 CFS October through April, which is considered, 10 May through September is summer in most people's minds. So, so 10 CFS in the summer and 7 CFS in the winter. Segment 2, the gauge to South Boulder Road, 10 CFS in the summer and 7 CFS in the winter. And then segment 3, South Boulder Road to the confluence of Boulder Creek, 4 CFS in the summer and 2.5 CFS in the winter. And CPW, many years ago, when we also were appropriating, the board was appropriating the in-stream flows on segment 1 and 2, did data collection and made recommendations for in-stream flows on that segment 3, but we had a water availability problem. So relying on that data, we are recommending that the board find that it's appropriate to protect 4 CFS in the summer and 2.5 CFS, in the winter. Getting my seasons mixed up, to preserve the natural environment to a reasonable degree. So the natural environment is a diverse fishery consisting of both native and non-native species. Up high, it's more of a cold water fishery, transitions down to more of a warm water fishery lower down, and the species are listed up there. And so we look at our Rule 6 factors, and because this donated water will first be stored in priority and then released for delivery to in-stream flow use and then subsequent downstream uses. Historical use and return flows are not an issue because this isn't a change case. Also, because this water has been stored in priority and released and added to the stream for in-stream flow use, there's no apparent potential material injury to existing decreed water rights. In the water court process, if anybody raises an issue of potential injury, that will be addressed in that process with any needed terms and conditions. This proposal will promote the maximum utilization of waters of the state by allowing this stored water to be released and beneficially used both for preserving the natural environment and then by Boulder and Lafayette for subsequent beneficial uses downstream of the in-stream flow reach. We've consulted with the Interstate, Federal, and Water Information Section, and this proposal does not negatively impact any interstate compact. And we've also consulted with Division of Water Resources. They've indicated that this proposal will be administrable provided that necessary measuring devices are installed and any modifications to diversion structures needed to bypass the released water are made. And the City of Boulder is taking the lead on both of those, on measuring devices and structure modifications. They have funding in place under the IGA for some of that work. So with that, I'm ready to go on to the staff recommendation. I don't know if you want to ask questions before that, or if I should just move to the recommendation.
Let's see if there are any questions. Are there any questions for Linda up to this point?
Oh, and I will say Joanna Bloom from City of Boulder is here if you have any questions for the city.
Welcome, Joanna. Are there any questions? Okay, please move on to your staff recommendation.
So staff is recommending that the board accept the interest in water that would be provided by Boulder under the water delivery agreement. And here is where I have added some new language in this second bullet. Based on its consideration of the in-stream flow Rule 6E factors, including potential material injury to existing decreed water rights, determine that the amounts set forth in the water delivery agreement are appropriate to preserve the natural environment to a reasonable degree on the subject reaches of South Boulder Creek in the time, amounts, and locations provided by the agreement. Segments 1 and 2 up to 8 CFS in the winter and 15 in the summer. Segment 3 up to 2.5 CFS in the winter and up to 5.8 CFS in the summer. We're also recommending that you determine that the best use of the interest in water to be acquired is to preserve the natural environment to a reasonable degree in the time, amounts, and locations provided by the water delivery agreement. And we're also asking you to authorize the CWCB director to finalize and sign the water delivery agreement in a form substantially similar to the one attached to the memo. We just have to make those couple of updates.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Joanna, before we move on, would you like to say anything to the board? Okay. Nothing you've already said anyway. Thank you for being here. All right. We have Director Yan.
Thank you for all your work on this. And thank you, Joanna, for showing up again. Sorry, thank you for your patience with us. And we just want to always make sure that we do all these things correctly. But thanks for all your work, Linda and your team, for doing this. And we are co-applicants now?
Yes.
That's correct. Okay.
We have orders in hand
All right.
saying that we're
All right.
co-applicants.
So I would move staff recommendation on agenda item 19.
It's been moved by Director Yan and seconded by Director Hawkins to approve staff recommendation on item 19. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we shall proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, we are now in recess. We will be back tomorrow morning in this very place at 8:30 a.m.